I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the At Random podcast. I am your host, Alex, and joining me today only is my beautiful wife, Ali. We don't have fucking that retard Andy here, thank God. So we're good today. How you doing?
Good. Why are you being so kind?
Well, I mean, Andy's not here, so it's a good day. he sent us apparently he's with his prick of a nephew or something, and he's babysitting him, and so
Just
apparently
say-
he's a tyrant. So Andy is basically like, you know, this sums up the man. He's calling like a 4-year-old kid a prick.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it's actually my fault. Why? Because we're recording on a different day than we usually record, and that was because of me. But whatever. Here we are.
Yeah, but whatever. It's a good day. Andy said he really needed booze to get through the day. We're sitting here. I'm having a gin and tonic. Ali's drinking a lemon seltzer or something.
Yes.
You know, so Andy, when you listen back to this, just remember that little TikTok that Ali sent you. But whatever. Let's get into it then. It's a pretty meaty boy, so it might actually be good that we don't have Andy because it could go on for 3 hours.
Eternity.
Because this is I got like 9 pages of notes.
What the fuck?
Yeah, well, it was so interesting. I was like, let's keep doing it. So what we're going to do, if you haven't worked out by the fucking title, is we're going to talk about Chernobyl.
Yes.
But a bit different to normal, because obviously, I mean, it's been done to death. Most people know about what happened.
Yeah, and then obviously with the HBO show, it really got a second boost, and people that didn't know about it find out about it, which is like, how did you not fucking know about it?
Exactly. So that's why the focus of this is not on like what happened, how it happened, and the actual incident itself. It's kind of on the legacy that's left. So like what's happened basically from the minutes and hours from there, basically through to the current day. Like what impact has that actually had on many things, scientifically, on, you know, the cleanup efforts, the impact on environmental, a lot of stuff here on the environmental impact. Yeah. So we're going to go over that. We're not going to go so much into, you know, this is what happened and blah, blah, blah. But of course, off the top, in case for some reason you don't know what it is.
Someone fucked up and turned off the thing.
At 1:23 and 40 seconds AM, so in the morning, on the 26th of April 1986, reactor number 4 in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which is in the Ukraine, near the border with Belarus, for those that don't know, not too far from Kiev, actually, really, which is the capital, for those that don't know. And the nuclear power plant was near the city of Pripyat, which was where all the workers lived. It was about 5 kilometers or something down the road. It was basically built to house the workers, more or less. Well, it was expanded rapidly to house the workers of the power plant. It exploded after a safety test gone wrong. It's one of only 2 nuclear energy accidents rated as a 7, which is the maximum, on the International Nuclear Event Scale.
And the second one being
Fukushima. Yeah. So the scale is logarithmic, kind of similar to the Richter scale used for earthquakes. So, you know, there's 7 steps, and obviously, so each step is like 10 times greater damage, basically, than the one before it, or whatever.
Not
like, you know,
30 times greater.
I can't remember, but it's something like that.
We were
literally
listening to a
scale.
podcast on that on our little road trip last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Whatever. And yeah, the other was the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan.
Yeah.
The initial emergency response and environmental decontamination involved more than 500,000 people and cost an estimated 18 billion Soviet rubles, which in today's, or in 2019 money, adjusted for inflation, is about 68 billion US dollars. And this is like the Soviet Union in the, you know, when it's sort of starting to wane, and they paid $68 billion for the recovery, or the recovery for the response and the emergency efforts.
There was no recovery there. Exactly. It was fucked.
So with that out of the way, let's get into sort of the content here. And so the first thing I want to focus on is like the immediate site and the area remediation. So like what they did at the power plant itself.
Yeah.
After the event happened. So we'll begin with the debris removal. So for anyone that's seen the HBO series Chernobyl, you'll know about this one.
Yeah, that scene it's brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's great though.
Yeah.
Great show. If you haven't seen it and you want to actually know more about, like, of course it's dramatized, but it's reasonably accurate. So if you want to know what sort of happened, go watch the HBO series. It's like a 6-part, 45-minute to an hour episodes.
Well, something that's really funny about the show is because Stellan Skarsgård is in it. He's a Swedish actor, and he actually remembered when that accident happened, because probably we'll get into it a bit later, but this affected the environment so much that it wasn't just to the Ukraine or Belarus. It affected
exactly.
a lot of places. So obviously he remembered restrictions living in Sweden growing up because of this disaster.
Yep. But back to the debris removal. So the explosion released approximately, I couldn't believe it was this much, approximately 100 tons of radioactive waste on the roof of like the adjacent buildings of the power plant. That needed to be cleared in order for them to build something called the sarcophagus, which we're going to get to a bit later.
Yeah.
The initial plan was to use robots, primarily provided by the USSR, but I think eventually they turned to some German robots or something. Of course, they all failed because the extreme radiation, like they weren't shielded for that level. Yeah, they just fried the components and basically made them useless. And to sort of quote how, well, at least one of the learnings that came out of this, one small positive, so to speak, was in 1987, so a year later, the first deputy director of the Kurchatov Institute of Atomic Energy in Moscow said that what they basically learned from this is that robots can't be used for everything.
Yeah.
There is a time, especially with high radiation, where unfortunately humans are required. I think these days, I think our technologies have progressed a bit more to shield from radiation, but back then in the late 80s Soviet era, wasn't up to scratch. And because the robots were useless, this meant that 90% of this, or 90 tons, had to be removed manually by people.
Bloody horrible.
They are known as the Chernobyl liquidators, that sort of group. And that's the all of the 500, I think it was almost about 600,000 people involved in the recovery effort. Collectively, they're known as the Chernobyl liquidators.
Okay.
And the people that cleared the debris, there was about 5,000 men. And from what I gathered, it was men only.
Why men only?
Most of them were like military.
Just sentenced to death.
Yeah, no, they were the military or like voluntary citizens, but I'm pretty sure from what I gathered, it was only men. I didn't. Maybe there were women there, but from what I gathered, the feeling I got was it was only men that were sent. They were dubbed bio-robots by the military. And they were only supposed to be allowed to spend 40 to 90 seconds exposed on the roof. And of course, they still had like some gear on.
Yeah.
But because the radiation was so extreme due to the graphite and other like cesium and uranium like isotopes that were there. Like you would die pretty quick if you were there much longer.
If you were exposed to it longer than
you would get deadly like doses.
Yeah.
They were also only supposed to do this one time each. So one man up there, 40 to 90 seconds with a shovel.
Yeah.
Go. But some reported actually doing it 5 or 6 times.
Fucking hell.
Yep.
Are they alive? They're not alive.
I didn't find out about that, but most of these people did survive. And most of them didn't have any real long-term effects. Some did, of course.
Yeah.
But not too many. The Chernobyl liquidators, of course, are like sort of largely recognized as heroes in, not just only in the Ukraine, but also because there was some Belarusian or Belarusian, I don't know what their correct term is, and some Russians. There were also some, I think, from the Czech Republic or something. People like, citizens of those countries that were actually there helping out. So in that sort of that region there in the Ukraine and surrounding areas, they're basically sort of, they were heroes. They still sort of are. They actually get, or got in some instances, like they kind of get a pension. Yeah. A special pension for being these liquidators.
Oh, okay.
But in the Ukraine, once they left the USSR, or, once the USSR collapsed, the Soviet, basically that got cut off. But then they brought in a thing to give it to them. But in the Ukraine, there's also a law. So if they were a Ukrainian, but now they've moved out of the country, they no longer get it. And obviously some of them moved to like Belarus or to Russia, and now they don't get compensation. And it was the same thing. Some of them living in like Estonia and Latvia.
That's
they
some
also
fucking
don't get
bullshit, though. Like,
yeah,
they
it's some
risk their
law
life.
from like 1901 that actually prevents them from doing it. Like,
yeah, but still, it's just stupid. Like, these people risk their life, like, beyond anything to actually save how many people? Like,
well, they saved like
billion.
the world in a way. Yeah. So that was. It's sad that they haven't been looked after at the same time. It's also, I'm not that surprised. You know, you're talking.
Yeah.
Poor, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, you know, those countries were very poor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, let's face it, they're not really known for their social welfare.
No.
But yeah, if you see a Chernobyl liquidator out there, just, I don't know, buy him a beer or something. And now onto the sarcophagus, which I mentioned a bit earlier. So they needed to clear this debris to build this thing they call the sarcophagus.
Mm-hmm.
So once the fire from the reactor and surrounding buildings was extinguished, which took 9 days,
yeah,
the attention turned to like how they could prevent spreading the contamination, right? So
yeah, because it's constantly radiating if it's
and literally, for those that don't know, like the reactor building was open, it exploded.
Yeah,
so
the
there's like
core
a crater,
was
and the building is the radioactive core is actually exposed to the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, they wanted to prevent like wind or birds from like coming. And like taking dust or debris elsewhere, right? Like especially a bird comes, it lands on the building, it touches stuff, and then it goes up and it flies away somewhere else, and then it irradiates trees and it kills other animals and so on and so forth. And then they spread it, and so on and so forth. They also wanted to stop like contamination going into the groundwater.
Yeah, that was a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. So if it rains, where's all that stuff going? Straight into the ground.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know as well, the power plant was built basically on the Pripyat River. So like literally it's like you drive across a bridge to get into the power plant. It's on this quite big river. And also the rain posed another threat because it could weaken the remaining reactor building, obviously by accelerating the corrosion, especially when it's mixing with all those contaminants.
Yeah.
It's going to like further accelerate the rate at which like that metal, the exposed steel and stuff is going to corrode, and it could collapse because again, the building is like blown open, but some of it is still standing. Yeah. And of course they want to keep it still standing. Especially because I knew this, but then it just reminded me when I started researching it again, because they kept reactor 3 operational.
Yeah.
So they had 4, I think there's 4 reactors. There could have been 6, but I'm pretty sure there's 4. And they actually kept reactor 3 still operational. So obviously they needed to shield those workers from the radioactive waste and energy.
Why? Like, why?
Because,
money.
Soviet Russia, whatever, Soviet Union. They had to prove that their technology was better than the Americans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't work so well.
No.
But, So the decision in the end that they took was they constructed a huge, and it's pretty fucking big, steel and concrete like composite structure that actually enclosed the damaged reactor, like core and building. And this became known as the sarcophagus. So for anyone out there, any of my main men that have played the Stalker Shadows of Chernobyl game or any of the Stalker games, you know this. We've all been inside the reactor in the sarcophagus. And for those that haven't played the Stalker games, do it. It's fucking awesome. And Stalker 2 comes out next year in March.
Oh, really?
Or April. Yeah, I can't fucking wait. Now back to the program. Of course, it had to be built like as quickly as possible and finished. Yeah. With high, just because the levels of gamma radiation from that exposed reactor core were astronomical. Yeah. Things, of course, no one other than at Fukushima has basically ever seen before. No. So,
and obviously this was before Fukushima, so no one had really seen it.
Yeah,
before.
this was like the blueprint for some things to do and some things not to do. Yeah. When it came to Fukushima. So design work started only 24 days after the incident. And you think how long it takes these fucking idiots who build our roads, maintain things here, at least here in Stockholm, it takes them like an eternity.
Yeah, but still 24 days?
Yeah, it took, well, I guess they had to theorize like what they could do, and then they started designing it. So they began designing it on the 20th of May, 1986, and construction took place June. So only a few weeks after the design had started, they began building. And the sarcophagus was under construction from June until late November that year. Then it was done.
Okay.
So in like 5 months, these guys had like enclosed a radioactive fucking core, and yet I got potholes on my street outside that had been there for 5 years. Go work that one out.
So these are the same people that...
These are all like the liquidators and stuff. They're military personnel, they're volunteer citizens, they're people from like other mines actually. If you watch the series, the Chernobyl series, you'll see a bit where they actually go, the military go to like coal miners and stuff and actually, hey, we need your expertise to come and help us on this.
I forgot that because obviously they had to build underneath the reactor.
Exactly, which we're going to get to a bit later as well.
Okay.
To protect the workers from the radiation, like crane operators were in like lead-lined crane, cabins, I guess you could call them. And of course, all the workers on the ground had like protective equipment on. All the buildings were like being shielded, or the vehicles they were trying to like shield with lead that had to go like really close to the reactor. Overall, the construction included... Like, they built a lot of stuff. They didn't just, like, put a fucking roof on it. So here, this is the stuff they actually built. So the construction included building walls around the perimeter of the power plant of that reactor.
Yeah.
Clearing the ground and all the surrounding area, and I mean digging up the dirt, taking it away, and then concreting the entire surface. So they took away all the surface soil that could have had radioactive waste in it.
Yeah.
Took all that dirt away. I think they ended up burying it deep, like a deep ground burial somewhere else. And then they concreted the whole thing. So then they could move their heavy trucks and machinery in and also make sure, obviously, if it rains now, there's no radioactive waste going in the ground. Then on top of that, they made a thick radiation shielding wall between reactor 3 and 4 to protect the workers still working in reactor 3. So like really thick concrete structure. Then they began building a high-rise buttress to strengthen the building, which is basically like a retaining wall, like a really strong support wall with a bunch of like steel beams coming off of it to make sure the building didn't collapse. Yeah. Then they built the roof over reactor 4, all in concrete, again, like, concrete and steel. And they had to build a ventilation system to extract and capture any airborne contamination that was arising within the shelter to make sure it didn't escape. And they would like try to sort of capture that and filter it.
Okay.
Like all the radiation, like radioactive dust. So they built that as well. So in the space of 5 months, they did all of that.
Yeah, they were hardworking.
Yeah, they were a bit so no wonder it took 600,000 people.
Yeah.
And now we get on to one thing I actually didn't know was the investigation of the of the reactor core.
The investigation?
Yeah, I didn't know this. And I know quite a bit about it because the Stalker games got me into Chernobyl, and then I did like high school papers on it and shit. But during so while they were building this sarcophagus, they sent scientific teams into the reactor core, like into the building. Yeah. To like study it. No. And I love the name. It's dubbed the Complex Expedition. Like no fucking shit. These guys are going like where no human has ever literally gone before.
Where no human wants to go.
Yeah, no human should go. And yeah, they re-entered the reactor building, the building 4, to locate and contain any leftover nuclear fuel. Because obviously if they build the sarcophagus and there's still fuel inside, and obviously it's still really hot inside, there's still reactions going on. And of course that could then just start a bigger fire and make another explosion, because now you're like encapsulating everything.
Yeah, you're encapsulating the heat and making it worse, and if there's stuff in it, it might explode again.
And it makes steam, right? And then the steam, and then it blows the top off the sarcophagus, and then boom, they're like 2 times worse disaster. So they actually had to go in there. But so they sent these poor scientists in there to go and make sure there was no leftover fuel and to take anything back. And
are they alive?
This stuff. I think so. Yeah, they had like super heavy gear, and of course it was like, from what I gathered, the whole investigation took about 6 months for like the team. So I think, like, you know, they would go in for a short period, then come back, and then have like a day or 2 rest, and then go back.
Still, the exposure.
Yeah, I know.
Fucking insane.
And again, that's why these people were heroes, right?
Yeah.
Probably forgotten these days, but they were at the time. They were very much not just like national, but like international heroes.
Yeah. Well, that's something sad about this show, like the HBO, when people think that it's all fiction. It's like, no, this actually happened.
Yeah, no, this absolutely happened. So yeah, the scientists manually collected cold fuel. Like, they did find cold fuel rods and stuff in there. And apparently the heat was still so immense that like they couldn't get too close to the reactor core because it was still super hot. And radiation levels in like different parts of the building, they were monitoring them by they had these really long metal detector tubes. So what they would do is they drill a hole all the way through the wall and then like pop them in and like seal them, so they could get different radiation readings in different points in the building, like the basement and the outer sections, closer to the core. And then the coolest thing is just in the December that year. So now the sarcophagus has just been built and they're in there again. After 6 months of investigations, they discovered, with the help of a remote camera, a radioactive mass more than 2 meters wide had formed in the basement of Reactor 4.
Yes.
The mass is known as the elephant's foot, for those who haven't seen it. Due to its wrinkled appearance, it kind of looks like an elephant's foot.
Yeah, it's really fucked up.
Yeah. It's composed of melted sand, melted concrete, and a large amount of like nuclear fuel that escaped the reactor. And so, like, again, this is in the basement, so it started like melting down through the floor.
Yeah. Isn't the core still active within the elephant foot, or they don't know?
I think so. Yeah, it is. Oh no, it's starting to deteriorate.
Yeah.
From what because now the half-life, like, obviously it's super active at first. Now it's starting to drop off the isotopes. But the bit that the scientists discovered, they've now realized is actually just a very small part of that mass. Like, that mass is actually a lot bigger.
Yeah.
They can only see the 2 meter bit, but they think it's actually significantly larger, like underneath where they can't see. At the time of the discovery, the elephant's foot emitted 8,000 Röntgens, or 80 grays per hour. To give you an example, 10 grays an hour, like 10 grays per hour or higher, will kill you within hours. So this 80 grays per hour could deliver a lethal dose of radiation within 5 minutes if you didn't have protective gear. Yeah, and so they found this. Like, again, they saw it with a camera, but they saw it.
Measure that? Like,
with detectors.
yeah, but still. And who figure out at what point you die?
People designing nuclear bombs, I guess. I don't know.
I just love that. Like, when you think of like the measuring stuff, like, oh, we know this is how much radiation a body can be exposed to before you die, within hours. Or if you're exposed to this much, you die within minutes. And like, I wonder, did anyone try that to actually conclude?
Of course, well, they only found this out in the 1920s or something, when they started playing around with like nuclear fuel cells, and no one was wearing protective equipment and wondering why they were getting really sick. I know.
I'm just thinking of these poor people that died.
Yeah, it's not nice, but you know. Hey, I mean, in a way, I'm glad that they found it out, because now the rest of us know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as you probably would have heard on the show, and Ali said before, is like the concrete beneath the reactor was like so steaming hot that it had actually been breached. Like, it had melted right through. And then a solidified, like, by this point in the December 1986, so what, 8 months after the incident, 7 to 8 months. Basically, there was like solidified lava and a spectacular unknown crystalline structure.
Oh yeah,
which is now called Chernobylite.
Yeah,
no one had ever seen it before, because no one had ever exploded a reactor core before. And so Chernobylite is a glass-like material, like it's really smooth and shiny, with up to 10% of its content being uranium. The rest of it is like, you know, concrete and sand. And,
Yeah.
But I think the sand, because it melted, it's kind of like glass, right?
Yeah, it's clear.
It's like sheen. But yeah, it's up to 10% of it is uranium isotopes. Like, I think it's 137 or whatever. Like the one for the fuel.
Don't talk about chemistry with me. Like, luckily enough, I know some of the things I find this interesting, but when you go into the full-on chemical talk, I just shut down completely. I'm like, no, I don't know.
Well, you know, there might be some nerds listening that just want to know.
Good on you. I'm not one of them.
In the end, though, it was eventually concluded by the scientists that like there was no further risk of explosion. You know, they'd taken out all the fuel. There was no steam gathering. So they left the sarcophagus and never went back after 6 or 7 months of investigating it.
Yeah.
So that was cool. Like, I didn't know that they actually went in there. I thought that happened like years later.
Yeah, I knew that they've gone in there, but like I said, I also didn't know that it was...
Yeah, like there's a really cool picture for you listening if you haven't seen it of the elephant's foot that was taken, I think, in 96. And by that point, the radiation had died down enough that they could... Some guy went in there and actually took pictures.
Yeah. No, it's something special.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I just like one random day, I just watched a whole YouTube video about the elephant's foot, and I was like, "What is this? Elephant's foot in Chernobyl? Huh? Let's watch it."
Why is there an elephant in Chernobyl?
Yeah. So I just spent like an hour just listening to this like random facts.
That's fascinating.
It is. And I just like that, like, wow.
Yeah. So that's the building of the sarcophagus, and now you have like the general area cleanup. The official contaminated zones like saw a cleanup take place over 7 months, so basically until the end of 1986.
Yeah,
they were very aggressive with their like remediation plans. The official reason for like doing it so quickly and it's such a dangerous cleanup, because obviously, you know, no one had studied anything, they weren't taking readings of stuff to make sure it was safe. They were just doing it. And the reason was, like, rather than waiting for the natural decay, like the half-life of the radioactive matter, the reason that they said was because the land had to be repopulated and brought back for agriculture. So within 15 months of the incident, 75% of the land that was under cultivation was being cultivated again in the Chernobyl sort of Pripyat area. Like,
what?
You know, growing plants and, you know, like wheat or whatever, carrots. But only about a third of the people that were evacuated, like, came back.
Yeah.
Within this time. And what's interesting here is that most of the land there is like, it's not like it's prime agricultural land, it's just land. Yeah. So like a lot of critics, of course, of the thing are sort of like, well, you know, you're putting all these people's lives at risk for land that is not really like, it's not prime agricultural land.
Yeah,
it's just land.
Why would you push to do that after something like a disaster like that?
Because Soviet Russia.
I know, but still, who the fuck wants to buy radioactive carrots?
Well, actually, my friend who lives in Northern Ireland sent me a picture the other day, and I shit you not, this is real.
Was it real?
It's real. He sent me a picture of carrots grown, and it's like origin Chernobyl. They're in his supermarket.
What? So it was actually real?
Yeah, no, they're real.
Because I oversaw that picture. I was like, what the fuck's that? And Alex showed it to me. And I'm like, no, that can't be real. That must be a meme.
That's what actually got me looking into this. And I was like, fuck, we should do an episode on this, because I didn't know you could eat carrots from Chernobyl. But if you're in the UK, you can.
Well.
And funnily enough, they're also called British carrots on the packaging. It was the dumbest thing ever. Like, British carrots straight from Chernobyl, Ukraine. Okay.
Well, it explains a lot. The British are the British.
It's true. It's not coming home, boys.
It didn't come home. It went to Rome.
Yeah, it went to Rome. But, yeah. So, according to historian David Marples, he believes that the administration actually had a psychological reason for the cleanup. Mm-hmm. And that was basically like they wanted to stop the panic and about nuclear energy and actually just restart the power station. So by cleaning up so aggressively and going, oh no, look, it's all good. We can come back to work now. And yeah, like I said, you know, they kept reactor 3 going. That's
the stupidest shit I've ever fucking heard. Like,
yeah, but
they caused one of the biggest disasters known to fucking mankind. And this bitch just want to pretend like, nah, it's good. We did a good cleanup. It's like,
Yep,
yeah, how many
but again,
people did fucking die because of
It's
it?
the Soviet era.
I know, but fuck me. Like, you have to put down your foot somewhere. And like I said, it's like, it wasn't just like people in their direct area next to the Ukraine that got affected. Like people up here in Sweden got affected. I don't know if you have that written down anywhere down the line. But obviously because of the winds and stuff and the radioactive blowing away.
Yeah.
And Stellan says this, I don't know where the fuck, I think it was another podcast.
Stellan Skarsgård, right?
Yeah, Stellan Skarsgård, the actor that's in the HBO, because you weren't allowed to eat mushrooms or pick mushrooms. And obviously in Sweden it's a very big thing, especially during...
get to why that is later.
Okay, I won't. Okay.
I'm going to tell you why
Okay, later. I'll leave it then.
Yeah,
Fuck.
so just hold your horses, lady.
No, I don't.
This is my episode, bitch.
But you know, when you get me going,
yeah, I know.
I get
but
going.
We're gonna get there a bit later,
Yeah.
and then you can say your spiel about Swedes and their love of mushrooms, which is true. But so one of the things, of course, you might be wondering is like, given how radioactive it is, and as we know, of course, metals in particular react to radiation, and they kind of other than lead, basically, and there's a few other metals, of course, but other metals like you can get super irradiated by it. So what do you reckon happened to the vehicles that were used in this cleanup?
Did they bury them in concrete?
Yes, some of them, they buried them, and others, there is actually a giant field in the exclusion zone, which again, we're going to get to a bit later, that is just like even military helicopters, fire trucks, cars, whatever, anything that was in there, they just left. Because obviously they couldn't take it out.
Yeah, you can't.
Because it was so irradiated, like it just was too dangerous.
Yeah.
So there are actually fields, and again, if you've played the Stalker Shadows of Chernobyl, and you go to the garbage section, it's actually called garbage, the part of the map, it's what it's called. And you'll find the bandits come and raid, and you help defend some stalkers, and
yeah. No, I just remember that obviously because they had to bury everything in concrete, and from this show, that scene where they bury the firemen.
Or the bodies and stuff.
Yeah, the bodies and chests with concrete.
Oh yeah, because I mean they were like off the charts with radiation, so it was again too dangerous to take to a morgue or something. But even though like they are so radioactive, of course scavengers have actually been there and like stripped things from these cars and helicopters, like anything valuable they've taken. Even though like it is so irradiated that like you would probably get radiation sickness from touching it.
Why would you do that?
Because Ukraine. I don't know. You know, if you're desperate for money, like, and you got a helicopter sitting there with like tech.
Yeah, I know. It just made me think of that other episode we did, the Darwin Awards, where the guy ran over the, what was it, the landmine?
Yeah, the RPG
or
head. Yeah. Go listen to that episode if you want to hear about idiots and how they died. But yeah, so they also decontaminated they tried to, at least to the best of their ability, like the whole urban area. So again, remember what I said before, it was built, the city of Pripyat was built, it's like a few kilometers down the road, which housed, and I think it was about 50,000 people lived there around this time. So it was quite big. They actually decontaminated it, which again, you see, it's not explained in the show what they're doing, but you see there is like a B-roll kind of scene, I think, you know, when he goes out hunting and has to shoot the dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah, during that scene, you'll see them, they're spraying a foam from these trucks on the road and on buildings.
Yeah.
It's actually a thing called Borda, which like a fluid, a sticky polymerizing fluid called Borda. I couldn't find out exactly what was in it.
Okay.
Again, because it's probably a secret. I don't know. But it was designed to like, what it does is it like encapsulates the radioactive dust because it's like a really thick, like polymer, like sticky substance.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is then they would spray it, they let it dry, and then they could actually just peel it off.
Ah.
So they would go on the roads and the sidewalks and the buildings that they sprayed, and they would then peel it off, roll it into almost like a roll of carpet, and then bury it. Deep ground burial. They dug giant trenches and just fucking chucked it in to take all that dust that was on the surface on these, the roads and stuff.
So they cleaned up Pripyat,
and like everywhere within the exclusion zone. They went on like every road, every building, every sidewalk, and they sprayed it with this thing, peeled it off.
Can you visit Pripyat?
Yes, you can go there now.
I knew you could go to Chernobyl because I know you want to do it. And we've talked about going.
I wanted to go for years, and then that fucking show came out, and then everyone started going. I was like, well, I guess I'll wait.
Yeah. We've been talking for years about going there. So, but yeah, we would have to wait just in case.
In case what?
Well,
if I'm going to get irradiated, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, I know, but more obviously, if we ever down the line we wanted to have kids, might be better
cool.
not.
You go to Chernobyl naked. I don't want kids. All right, so
maybe I don't want to. I've said this on the podcast many times, but still, you never know.
Calm your titties. So with that out the way, let's get on to the environmental impact. Of course, some of this is an environmental impact. You know, of course, spraying a fucking polymer resin all over the environment's probably not the best thing for it, but at the same time, neither is having irradiated dust.
Yeah.
But let's get onto it. So, like I said, it's located on the Pripyat River, the power plant, which actually feeds into the Dnieper reservoir system, which is one of the largest in Europe. And at the time, this reservoir system provided water to Kiev's 2.4 million residents. And it was also in the spring floods because, you know, in April, it's springtime. So, of course, a lot of water was running into that system when this incident happened.
Jesus.
So, of course, this made radioactive contamination a very big concern, like of the water supply for Kiev's biggest, for Ukraine's biggest city, of course, a really big deal. So what they initially did is they bumped up the guidelines for the safe radiation levels in drinking water. Classic, you know, short term. They bumped it up to 3,700 becquerel per liter, which is some measurement of radioactivity. No idea what is normally safe. Becquerel?
Becquerel?
Becquerel.
Cute.
Yeah. But basically it meant that the vast majority of the water was safe for drinking by the amount that they bumped it up. It was officially stated that all contaminants had settled to the bottom of the river and reservoir systems in an insoluble state. Okay. So meaning it can't dissolve in water. So it was like a solid mass. And that it would not dissolve for 800 to 1,000 years. So now there's just radioactive dust sitting there. Yeah, for the next 50 generations.
Yeah. See if we live that long.
If you live near Chernobyl, you might. You never know. But despite this, 2 months after the disaster, they actually changed Kiev's water supply to the Desna River instead of using the Dnieper reservoir system.
Yeah.
So even though they said hey, it's fine, they also switched the water supply for the city. So,
which in other words, it probably wasn't fine. Yeah. We're just saying it is fine,
or at least not as fine as they said. Or trying to make out. They also built silt traps. So, silt is like sand and particles in water, right? It's like sludge. So they created a whole bunch of silt traps, all through that system, that river system, the Dnieper system and the Pripyat River.
Okay.
They also made a 30 meters deep, thick barrier of concrete to prevent groundwater underneath the reactor core getting polluted by contaminants. 30-meter thick concrete.
Okay. Hell.
Underneath, they dug underneath the reactor core. That's what those the coal miners were doing. And they built this huge thing, and then they just poured concrete, basically to make sure. So when the bottom of the reactor was eventually going to collapse all the way through.
Yeah.
But so obviously that radiation didn't enter the water, so the groundwater.
Yeah.
So of course that's used, in wells and other applications. Another thing, so while we're on the topic of water, is of course the accumulation of radioactivity in fish. So in the sort of European Union, the safety level is 1,000 becquerels per kilogram or something of meat. That radioactive unit for safe radionuclide concentration. That's the maximum average. So that's a maximum permissible amount.
Yeah.
Of course, some countries have slightly different, but that's a European Union sort of average.
Yeah.
Approximately 3 times the average, the fish in the Kiev reservoir had in the radioactive content in their bodies. So they were about 3,000 becquerels per kilo or whatever for the first few years after the incident, like during and after the incident. In small, what they call like closed lakes in Belarus, apparently Belarus has a lot because it has some mountains and stuff. It actually has this like these lakes that like they don't feed into any rivers or anything. It's kind of just water that like runs down mountains and valleys and kind of collects there.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not connected to anything else.
Yeah.
Just like a capture, almost like a reservoir, like natural reservoir. So yeah, in these closed lakes in Belarus and the Bryansk region of Russia, concentrations in some species of fish reached up to 60 times the safe radiation levels. 60.
Yeah.
And this was during 1990 to 92. This was 4 to 6 years after the incident.
Yeah, well,
so you can only imagine like straight afterwards what it would have been.
But doesn't it have to do with obviously or with the food chain sort of deal? Because as a fish dies in the water and then other fish eat it, in a sense that the radiation levels would go up and be higher and sort of stuff.
No, these ones are because they're close lakes. Like I said, the water can't run off anywhere.
Okay.
So it can't disperse and kind of over time, thin out.
Yeah.
That water is trapped there. The only way it gets out is by evaporating, and then it just rains.
Back down.
And, it goes back down into there, right? So yeah, they were up to 60 times in Belarus and Russia. So not even in the Ukraine, where the incident actually happened.
Mm.
And then after the disaster, this is also cool if you've played Stalker. 4 square kilometers, or 1.5 square miles for morons, of pine forest directly downwind from the reactor turned a reddish brown and died.
Yeah.
It's now known as the Red Forest.
Yeah.
The Red Forest was actually bulldozed entirely and buried during the cleanup because it was those trees were so irradiated. They actually just tore them all down, that 4 square kilometer patch, and buried them.
Okay. I thought they were still up for some reason.
No, but to this day, because of the soil there and stuff was still so contaminated, to this day, it's still one of the most irradiated places on Earth.
Mm.
Like you basically, if you went in there, you'd probably get sick and die.
Cute.
Yeah. And I think the trees still grow red now to this day.
I think they do.
But yeah, they tried to prevent it anyway. They cleared the entire section of forest. Of course, as we would expect, some of the animals died, obviously, or actually stopped reproducing after the incident. Like they didn't die or get weird growths or cancers, and they just stopped. They couldn't. They became sterile, basically. Most of the domestic animals were removed from the 30-kilometer exclusion zone, which we'll talk about the exclusion zone a bit later.
I love that you say removed. It's...
Yeah, well, they were shot.
Yeah.
Well, no, some people I think could take their pets. I'm not sure.
No.
I doubt it. I think they shot them. I know that they shot them. Again, if you watch the show and if you know much about it, they shot, because of course the people just had to up and leave. They couldn't take their dogs and stuff, so the dogs and stuff, they just got shot.
It's more obviously because they didn't really tell them this. They said that they would be back in a few hours.
Yeah, exactly. And
so
still
they
to this day,
think.
there's wild dog packs and stuff that roam around the zone. It's quite dangerous, obviously. So
apparently they're not that dangerous. They're not that irradiated.
No, I mean, but they're just wild dogs.
Yeah. That's
what I mean. I'm not saying they're irradiated. I'm saying they're wild packs of dogs, which is obviously always dangerous.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, in total, the exclusion zone, because it's a 30-kilometer radius, right, from the power plant. So meaning 30 kilometers in any direction. So in total, it covers 2,600 square kilometers or 1,000 square miles in area. So it's a pretty big area.
Yep.
And by exclusion zone, I mean basically now you need permission and stuff to get in. You need to. I think as a tourist you can go in, but you have to be with a registered guide.
Yep.
You can't just turn up. They have military checkpoints on all the ways in and out, and you have to have Geiger meters. You have to do radiation checks when you come in, when you come out. You have to have proper protection. They check your clothes and stuff when you come back out. It's very serious.
Yeah, you hope it would be though.
Yeah. But on a sad note, some horses were actually left on a small island on the Pripyat River. It's like a little 4 square kilometer just island in the middle. And they all died when their thyroid glands were just destroyed by the radiation. which were levels of 150 to 200 sieverts. Human levels are about 50 millisieverts in a year to be like maximum to be safe.
Yeah.
So that's like 1/3000th of the radiation, and that's across a year. These were just like, they just got blasted with radiation, obviously. So they all died when their thyroid glands just like got destroyed. Some cattle on the same island also died, but those that survived were actually stunted, like they didn't grow.
Yeah.
But the later generations seemed to be back to normal. So it was only like that sort of immediate generation that was born around the time of the incident, and now they're back to like just regular cows.
But are they offsprings of the cows that were there when it happened?
Yes. Yeah. Like you can't go there, you can't eat them or anything. They're just like basically at this point wild bovine, like wild cows, in a way. Between 1986 and 1990, some farms in the Narodichi region in Ukraine, definitely not how you pronounce it, by the way, reported up to 350 animals had severe deformities, like that were born in the 4 years after the incident. In the 5 years before that, there had only been 3 reported abnormalities. So it went from 3 in the 5 years previous to 350 in the 5 years after. They had deformities such as missing or extra limbs, missing eyes, missing heads, missing ribs, or deformed skulls. So quite severe, major deformities.
Sounds like radiation.
Yes. Studies have shown that after being exposed to radiation... Oh, yes. Here we go. This goes back to what you're talking about, the mushrooms. So studies had shown, or have shown since, that after being exposed to radiation, some bacteria and viral specimens, including some that cause hepatitis, underwent rapid changes. So the bacteria and viruses like mutated much differently and quicker to what would normally happen. They found a species of fungus that thrived in Chernobyl, in the contaminated area, like in the most contaminated area, which is now actually being investigated for the purpose of using its melanin to protect against high radiation environments such as space.
Oh, cool.
So they're thinking of like cultivating that fungus for like astronauts and stuff, if you like, in the line when space travel happens.
Well, that's really cool.
So that's at least one positive again, I guess, right? The Ukraine dairy farms reported after the disaster the highest ever levels of radiocesium due to soil to dairy transmission. This is in the history of the world, of course. So, of course, the cows eating grass and walking on the ground, and they get irradiated, and then it passes on to humans. During the Soviet era, they started, of course, after the Chernobyl incident, they started importing a lot of food into the Ukraine, obviously, because you couldn't really eat where you shouldn't eat. As we know, fish up to 3 to 60 times the radiation, and cows that are either dying or stunted because of radiation, you can't eat them.
Yeah.
But of course, after the USSR collapsed, contamination levels in the food in the Ukraine actually rose again, and dairy rose again for a short period, because obviously they didn't have the Soviet backing anymore to import food from other Soviet countries. They had to start locally producing again.
Yeah.
It's now back to kind of normal, perfectly safe, fine levels. But there was a brief bump after the fall of the Soviet Union where the Ukraine had a lot of problems with radiation in their food. But there was nothing they could do. Like, boys got to eat. Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah. So some villages have also actually returned to their farms. I think there's 167 people now that live permanently, are back in the exclusion zone.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And of course, they've started drinking milk from the local cows again and stuff, and foraging berries and mushrooms. And like we just said, there was a mushroom that's thriving in the radioactive environment. So, they're getting sick, obviously.
Yeah, well, back to the mushrooms that I was saying.
Yep.
Obviously, because of the winds carrying over the radiation particles and everything, it irradiated a large part of Sweden as well. So for many years, you weren't allowed to pick mushrooms or eat them, or it was very like you were told not to do. But also like you weren't allowed to eat wild, like any, because obviously Sweden has a lot of hunting and stuff like that. We eat a lot of elk and different stuff. So you weren't allowed to eat any game meat. Meats, so not reindeers, elks, or anything for a few years.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense.
Yeah, but still, but obviously that, for example, had a big impact on the Samis, because the Sami
are the indigenous people in northern Sweden. For people that don't know, Sweden does have indigenous people, actually.
Yeah. So obviously, and they are the ones that own the reindeers and live of them. So they weren't allowed to sell or eat the meat either.
Crippled them. Yeah. There are towns which thrive. They literally exist around the reindeer.
Yeah, we were literally up there last week, so.
Yeah, exactly. But and to sort of prove your point of why you shouldn't eat mushrooms and stuff. Mm-hmm. So in 2007, they sent a robot into the reactor to retrieve samples of these mushrooms.
Okay.
The melanin-rich, they're black, like dark black melanin-rich fungus. And they're growing all over the walls in the reactor. Apparently they're like taking over. It's almost like all fungus now. And what they found is that the fungus is actually using the radiation for energy. They're actually absorbing the radiation and using that to continue growing.
So they're parasiting off the core.
Yeah, they're basically benefiting. They've like evolved somehow to actually, instead of using sunlight or moisture or like nitrates from the soil for food, they're using the radiation. And that's why, and apparently fungi are very sensitive to this. This isn't the only one ever that they've found that does this.
Yeah.
But they found that a lot of fungus, when exposed to radiation, can do this. And that's why you couldn't eat the fungus in Sweden, the mushrooms.
Yeah.
Because, of course, and anyone that's seen a mushroom, they're very, like, soft textured, and they, like, absorb a lot of stuff, right? So, of course, they just absorb huge amounts of this radiation.
Yeah, well, obviously, for people that don't know fungus in general, they only have 3 ways to, like... get energy, because they don't really absorb as much from the ground and stuff. They either are parasites and live off other creatures, so trees or animals or stuff like that, or they break down dead animals or dead logs and stuff, or they live in symbiosis with trees. So they get some energies from the trees and they give other stuff
nutrients back.
So they're
well,
special.
This one's living in symbiosis with a nuclear power plant.
Cool.
With a nuclear core. But fingers crossed, at least this is the one that they can hopefully use to help with protect against high radiation. So
that is really cool.
At least it could work out all right. To further show the reach of the radiation on the food chain, this is a lot of boars. Apparently Germany has a lot of wild boar. In the 2010 hunting season in Germany, they killed 440,350 boars.
What?
Nearly 1,000 of them, so like, I don't know, what's that, like 0.25%? So not a high percentage, but nearly 1,000 of them had radiation levels above the maximum limit.
In 2010?
In 2010. And they basically said it's due to the radiation in Chernobyl. Because of the foods that they eat. And things like that, right? The evidence suggests that like German and Ukrainian boars, like they've subsisted, like they've lived on the irradiated fungi, leading to high radiation levels. Because of course they're eating these mushrooms and foraging on the berries and the mushrooms, and then people go to eat them, and that's why they have huge. Some of them, up to 1,000 of them in that year, had above maximum levels, because they also eat. They love these things called the deer truffle. Yeah, which is a truffle is a type of fungus. For anyone that doesn't know, truffle is delicious, of course. Mm-hmm. But what actually happens is that fungus actually magnifies the radiocesium, and cesium's a radioactive heavy metal that's used in radioactive fuels. But they also naturally have a concentration of arsenic in them, in the truffle. Ah. So when you combine those two together, they were heavily irradiating some of these animals, some of these boars.
So they naturally contained a lot of...
Yeah, well, it naturally contains some arsenic, but I think that combination of the arsenic with the cesium,
with the radiation,
isotopes just, was irradiating the boars. And again, this is in 2010. This is only 11 years ago, so it's probably still happening today for sure.
Yeah.
They're still going to be killing boars in Germany and finding that they're irradiated. A 2015 study showed that overall, though, there's not really any long-term impact on the abundance of mammals around Chernobyl. In fact, it's actually somewhat of a wildlife sanctuary, obviously, because the humans have left.
Yeah.
So, like, now there's animals are in abundance there.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And are bouncing back. Of course, you shouldn't eat them, though. Don't eat them. just leave them alone. But, again, just to further point out the spread and the impact that Chernobyl had. So, on high ground areas such as mountains, there's an effect called the adiabatic, like, cooling, which is, of course, like... You have like two sides. It's also called like the rain shear or something, right? So of course on one side of the mountain it's dry and on the other side it's raining, right? Because you know the way that the air like in the atmosphere blends hot and cold and low and high pressure systems together around mountain ranges. So what this does is that, of course, this leads to more precipitation, like more rain and snow on mountains. This resulted in higher levels of radiation in some distant lands such as Norway and the UK as a result of the Chernobyl disaster.
Yeah.
It had such an effect that the Norwegian, like in Norway, they have in the mountains up north, they graze cattle and sheep like lamb for meat. They let them graze in the summer and then they take them back in the winter. There is still to this day, they monitor and check all the animals before slaughter for radiation levels. And what they actually do is if they have slightly, like they don't have extremely above. So if they have slightly above, they actually have a diet for the next 100 days before the animal gets slaughtered for food. They have to eat this specific type of food to bring down the radiation levels in their body. And Norway expects this to happen for another 100 years at least. Like they're going to have to be checking their meat.
Yep.
As a result of Chernobyl. And just finally to sort of round it up, the exclusion zone, which I mentioned a few times, it's an area again, 30 kilometer in radius or 19 miles in all directions from the power plant, officially called the zone of alienation, but often just called the exclusion zone. It's mostly just reverted back to forest now, of course, because, you know, the humans have left and it's full of wildlife. There's dogs and I think even wolves have started coming back and in abundance and all these wild animals now. But give me a guess, how long do you think it would take to rehabilitate this exclusion zone? Like how many years till it's like safe for humans to go back?
Oi, you want me to give you a guess?
Yeah, give me a guess because I've got 4 numbers here. From 4 different people or groups.
So it's been what, like 50 years?
35.
35.
This year.
This year's 35 years. So I would say probably another 200 years.
Another 200, you say? Well, you're on the low side. But the Ukraine state authorities, so of course the government, they say it'll be 320 years or less. So say around your numbers falls in that category.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Chernobyl director, Ihor Gramotkin, says it will take 20,000 years or more.
Yeah.
Greenpeace says it will take tens of thousands, and the Christian Science Monitor, which is apparently a Christian scientific magazine that reports on I know, it doesn't make sense to me either. They say it's going to take 3,000 years. So we've got anywhere from 320 years or less to tens of thousands and anywhere in between. In other words, no one fucking knows.
Yeah. In other words, don't live there.
Yeah, exactly. As of 2016, it was 187 local people have moved back there, not 167. In 2011, was when the Ukraine government opened up to tourism to the zone, because of course people wanted to go to learn more about the tragedy that happened there. You can go there. Of course, you can't go in the power plant, but you can go to Pripyat and some areas there. It has to be a guided tour. I think some offer an overnight or a 3-day camping trip, but I don't think they're technically legal from what I've gathered. Could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, but anyway, I've seen some videos. Go and watch like the videos of people in Pripyat. I mean, it's a city where people just upped and left. There's like, kids' dolls sitting there.
Yeah.
They have the big Ferris wheel that's like super irradiated still.
It's
they had
a
like
ghost town.
Yeah, it's a literal ghost town. If you want to know what it looks like when humans just up and leave, that's where you want to go. And the very last point in this, it's been a pretty solid episode.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's been pretty long, but it's about on point because we don't have Andy. So we've been able to get through it. I was worried this would be like take forever. But of course, as I said, the forest is coming back in that area. But that area is also prone to forest fires in summer.
Yeah.
Annual, like perennial fires. So, of course, that's a big problem at the minute. Is they have a very big concern now and moving forward of the impact of those fires releasing more toxins again. Because like I said, the red forest, they upped and burnt all of it, and I'm pretty sure it's those trees are back and they still have a reddish brown tint because they're still growing in irradiated soil.
Wouldn't they, when they burn, obviously release more?
Yes. And in April 2020, 20,000 hectares of the forest in the zone actually caught fire. Which actually increased levels of cesium-137 and strontium-90 isotopes to detectable but not dangerous levels, but it was detected. It did increase it. So if you smoke, don't go to the zone and throw your fucking cigarette on the ground. You're going to kill us all. For the love of God, man, don't do it.
Seriously, like, how fucked up is it? Like, one person fucked up.
Yeah, well, one guy just didn't believe the readings in the power plant. Like, it's impossible.
Yeah.
It can't be.
Yeah. And now we're all doomed.
And then they thought they had a power drop, so then they like cut the power or something, and then tried to boost it, and then it just went through the roof and exploded.
Why do we have to suffer?
This is, in a brief 1 hour sort of package, a bit of a summary of the legacy that Chernobyl's kind of left behind and will into the future. So, of course, the impact, like we said, it's greater reaching than just that area in the Ukraine. Yeah,
that's because a lot of people don't, and we've mentioned it before, a lot of people don't know the actual what happened. Obviously, more people have gotten to know it because of the HBO show.
Yeah.
But there's still people that don't know about it, that haven't seen the show and don't really know about history. I don't know. I'm so tired of meeting stupid people, but I somehow always manage to come across them. And yeah, but also you don't really know about this. Like, for example, with the forest thing, like how it's prone to fires and the danger that would pose to the rest of Europe because...
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but you're never going to think about it, right? You're like, it's a tree.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But when it catches fire and it's irradiated, of course, that irradiated ash
goes
into the air and gets blown over continental Europe. And
yeah, obviously, like, I don't know, since you're from Australia and I think most people know about the bushfires and stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously we are a bit more aware on what actually happens when a bushfire and how devastating they can be and how fast it travels. And obviously just by the fire traveling that fast, imagine all the other shit that travels with the wind and...
No, it's incredible. And same thing, the fish in Russia, which is, pretty far from the... I think this region was reasonably far from the power plant, and having 60 times the radiation, like safe in quotations, maximum.
Yeah, but mostly all fish throughout lakes in Europe have been contaminated.
Yeah,
and are till this day some fish you should not eat.
Yeah, because fish are very prone to like absorbing these heavy metals and heavy toxins. That's why. And it's just
that's why you're pregnant. You shouldn't eat. Like I know. Like in Sweden, you shouldn't eat fish from certain lakes because the radiation is so high. Obviously, in general, you shouldn't try to avoid very radiated fish. But like I said, you don't really find out about this sort of shit. But
that's why I thought it would be more fun to, rather than just talk about the incident itself, let's talk about what the impact it had. And again, like these 600,000 people that some of them now don't even get a pension. Who put their life on the line, and some of them, of course, did die of radiation poisoning. I didn't want to focus too much on the human part because that we know a lot about that.
Yeah.
There were increases in thyroid cancer immediately afterwards. There have been a bit more deformities, but in general, it hasn't impacted the Ukrainian or Belarusian people too much, generally speaking. But yeah, you know, like it has an impact, and these people haven't really been looked after. And like, you know, these bio robots, right? These people grabbing fucking molten hot graphite from the roof of a building that's heavily irradiated and chucking it, just so that the rest of us didn't have to suffer from. What if that building collapsed and all of that dispersed everywhere, started another explosion?
Yeah. Cheers for those guys.
Yeah. So pour a drink for those guys, for the Chernobyl. What were they called? Liquidators. The Chernobyl liquidators.
Yeah.
And maybe Estonian governments and Ukrainian governments and all of that, you should get your shit together and look after those people, because they literally saved not only you but also the rest of us in the rest of, you know, certainly in Europe, but even other parts of the world. I mean, it was detected as far, like radiation levels were detected as far as the US, and I think even in Australia, from a result of the winds just carrying this radiation. So
well, I'm pretty sure, wasn't it like the first? I'm pretty sure it was Sweden that caught on, because obviously when it all happened, the Ukraine being part of the Soviet Union, they didn't really want to tell what happened.
It was a scientist in Minsk, I think, in Belarus.
Yeah, no, but that's what's in the show. But I'm pretty sure like Sweden was one of the first ones that caught the ratings.
Yeah, one of the first countries, that detected. That's true. Yes. Yeah. But then I think in Belarus, with the first, I can't remember her name, but she was like, these numbers are really high, and most people are like, don't worry about it. It's probably just a bum reading. But she was like, no, we have a power plant, like, you know, 200 kilometers away. Oh, I wonder what happened. Yeah. Picks up the phone, no one's answering, and yeah. But yeah, that's so that's kind of the legacy of Chernobyl. Again, in a small package, you know, you could dig deep into some of these stats and look into, you know, the investigation more, where they went inside. But of course, you know, we're trying to
pretty much every aspect of what you went into today, you can dive so much deeper into.
Of course, yeah.
You can do a full episode on just each of the points that you pointed out.
I mean, I can do a full episode on the video game too, Stalker Shadows of Chernobyl. But I mean, it's fantasy, or it's fiction, but it's fucking cool. But yeah, on that bombshell, it was nice not having Andy. I hope he's listening to this. Go fuck yourself, buddy.
He's so lovely.
I love Andy in a way. You know.
Well, we miss you, Andy.
We miss him. He's our spiritual leader. Hopefully he's back next episode. I think Ali's finally doing her. She was supposed to do about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Ago. I've been busy.
Yeah. Excuses. She just doesn't like you people.
That's not it.
But yep.
Maths are hard, okay?
Maths are hard, yes. And so is English, apparently. And on that bombshell, well, that's the legacy of Chernobyl. I've been Alex. She's Ali.
Yes.
What's the Instagram that you never use?
So @random.podcast. So at.random.podcast at Instagram.
And on Twitter, we are @_randompod. And as always, as Andy would say, go join the Discord. Discoin. Go join the Discord server, you fucks. Link in the description, in the show notes, whatever. And we'll catch you next time.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.